Hello, this is about your doubts into the cost sheet questions. Remember, in the prime cost we need to take the raw material which is consumed, at the same time direct wages and direct expenses. Now in raw material which is consumed, you must understand that we need to adjust it with the opening and closing stock, return, etc. And not only will be taking the cost of the raw material, we need to take the carriage on raw material and also the primary packaging items. Now this primary packaging and direct carriage paid on raw materials are to be added to the cost of direct material. Then wages, we need to take the direct wages, but remember here that if any amount of direct wages which is not paid, that is outstanding, or which is prepaid, that needs to be adjusted. At the same time, we need to find out the direct expenses also. There are very few examples of direct expenses. You can easily remember all those things. One is royalty, one is the higher charges of special plans, or it may be direct expenses or chargeable expenses. These few items are only there. Now adding all, we will be getting a prime cost, and with the prime cost we need to add the factory overhead first. Now in factory overheads, any expenses which is related to the factory needs to be added there. Here also the same adjustment of outstanding and prepaid we need to make. Now remember here that it will be all the items like indirect materials, indirect wages and indirect expenses needs to be taken. At the same time, some items are there which are a little bit confusing, maybe a little bit confusing to you, like drawing office salary. Now, as I already told, the drawing office is an office where the drawing and designings are made. Now, this drawing and designing are a operation of factory. It is not an operation of office. Drawing and designing are factory related to the factory and production. So it is a production overhead. First thing, haulage is production overhead. At the same time, one more item is there which is sale of scrap. Now when the scraps are sold, that is a very minimum. Whenever you are producing something, some scrap may come out, and those scraps can be sold at a very minimum price. Now that price should be deducted from the total amount of factory overhead. Now another item is defective items, that means reproducing or rectification of the defective items. Those are also same thing, that kind of items which just came out as defective, that needs to be again processed so that it is converted into good items. So after adding all these things, we will be getting an amount of works cost. Now this works cost, of course, is the gross works cost, because now at this stage we need to add and subtract the opening and closing stock of work in progress, WIP. Work in progress or semi-finished goods are those goods where the production is not complete. With the net works cost so calculated, we need to add all the items of office overhead or administrative overhead at first. Here also the same rule will follow. That means if any adjustment needs to be made for outstanding or prepaid expenses, that we need to make. Then we will be finding all expenses which is related to office, and we will be adding all those items. And now the result will be the cost of production. But remember, here we will not be, after this itself, we won't be adding the selling and distribution overhead, because selling and distribution overheads are paid only on the items or the units which are actually sold. So here we need to make an adjustment of the opening and closing stock of finished goods, and then we will be finding the cost of goods sold. Now with the amount of cost of goods sold, we will be adding the amount of selling and distribution overhead. Now selling and distribution overhead are all those selling expenses which you need to add, and the final will be your cost of sales. Now with this cost of sales, we need to add the amount of profit to find out the sales, or if sales is given in the questions, then the difference will be taken as the amount of profit or loss. Now there are some items on which I would like to discuss. First thing is, if any item which is there, which has been paid for any abnormal reason. Suppose there is a machine breakdown. For that reason, some overtime expenses has to be paid. Now, normally overtime means the extra payment which we make for overstaying in the office or factory. Now, overtime expenses, if it is paid for the office staffs, it will go as office overhead. Overtime expenses, if it is paid for the productive staff, it will go as a production overhead. Okay. Now, if the overtime has happened due to any abnormal reason. Now, what is an abnormal reason? Abnormal reason may be machine breakdown, maybe fire occurred, may be shortage of material or electric power cut. So all these things are abnormal reasons. Now, if the overtime has to be made for this abnormal reason, this will not be considered into cost sheet. This will be adjusted into costing profit and loss account. Costing profit and loss account is different from the normal profit and loss account which is prepared in financial accounts. So this will be deducted as an expense into costing profit and loss account. So anything which is abnormal will not be taken there into cost of production or cost to calculate the cost of sales. Now, and some items are there which actually we need to discuss. Those are pure financial expenditures. Those expenses will not be, although it is a valid expenses, this will not be considered into cost sheet. Now, what are those expenses? We have listed out in the class also. Now again we are trying to make it. Any amount of income tax paid, any amount of charity or donation made, any amount of appropriation of profit, that means transfer to reserve, transfer to for provision for doubtful debts, and also the preliminary expenses or goodwill written off. All these expenses are pure financial in nature, and also interest on any kind of loan also need not be taken into consideration. One more thing we need to understand is that if any asset is purchased, maybe office furniture or maybe machinery which will be used in the production, but the benefit for that asset will be coming in future years. So in that case, this is not an expired expenditure, this is an unexpired expenditure. So what we need to do, we need to eliminate or should not consider this amount of asset purchase also. And remember, if any expenditure is there along with that asset purchase, just like carriage or tax paid on those asset purchase, that also needs to be capitalized. Similarly, the repair, if it is a major repair, so major repair also needs to be capitalized. It won't be treated as a normal cost. So these are the few items which I can find. I could remember that these might create a problem or confusion to you. So you were expected and you were suggested to practice all the questions. If some questions coming into your mind, so you can ask me directly through WeChat or through Google Classroom. But we need to shift to the next chapter, that is material, because we are having very less time. So many questions are there for practice. In the textbook also we will get some. You go on practicing. If some confusion are there, definitely you can always ask me. I am always ready to give you the answer. Thank you.